almost equally important, maybe as important, is what we're doing to our children with this trans insanity. I mean, this is almost my single issue. We are chopping off the healthy body parts of young children without, 100% we are doing that.
Well, we are definitely doing that.
Without any inquisition.
That's what it is. So
into
I don't know
what's
what
happening.
the oohing is about.
I don't either. Pay attention, because I'm about to give you a truth bomb. Kids who are suffering from bullying, or who have been sexually assaulted, or who are going through normal puberty and feel uncomfortable in their bodies, will say to their parents, I'm not sure, maybe I'm gender confused. They will send them into a psychiatrist or psychologist who are told by our organizations, the American Psychiatry Association, and all the others that run their licensing, you must affirm. Affirm is the only standard. And so the child gets told, you're right, you are secretly a boy, or vice versa. And the child gets put on puberty blockers, into cross-sex hormones, which sterilize a child and deprive the child of any chance of sexual pleasure for the rest of his or her life. We're talking about 9, 10, 11-year-olds who cannot give informed consent. Then they have body parts chopped off by a medical establishment and by parents who mean well but believe in these doctors, and they shouldn't. And when they inevitably get past the awkwardness of puberty or what have you, and they want to turn around and detransition, those who love bomb them on Reddit saying, come on in, the water's fine, abandon them. They are depressed. They have changed their bodies forever in a way that is irreversible. And we are all sitting back saying, it's a remote issue, as Kamala Harris said. It's not remote. It's the issue of our time, both with respect to children and women's rights.
The lawyer who's going to argue this high-profile case before the U.S. Supreme Court, Chase Strangio. Chase, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So the case comes at a time when 26 states have passed laws restricting healthcare treatments for transgender youth, according to a CNN analysis of data from the nonprofit think tank Movement Advancement Project. So how do you plan to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that could have wide-ranging implications beyond the state of Tennessee?
Well, thank you for having me, Jake. And obviously, this is a critical inflection point for transgender people across the country. We're coming off of an election season where transgender people played an outside role in people's consciousness in terms of the way in which we were situated as a threat to others. And when we look at the map of states that ban this type of evidence-based healthcare, we went from 0 states that had these bans in 2020 to now more than half the country. So before the court tomorrow, the question is really a simple one as I see it. It's really, this is a law that bans medical treatment only when it is prescribed inconsistent with an individual's sex. Our argument is that that treats people differently because of their sex, and therefore the court has to treat it like all other forms of sex discrimination, and that's why it's unconstitutional.
I know what you're thinking. Your ears did not sync up with your eyes. I know. It's we all have that problem, right? Obviously, that's a man, right? Obviously, that's a man. But I digress. As you guys well know, that the Supreme Court recently took on a case about transgender bans on the Tennessee case, I believe, and everyone's showing up, right? And this is one of the things that I have concerns about with the transgender movement or in the transgender ideology. They claim to be evidence-based. They claim that, oh, this gender-affirming care actually helps gender dysphoria, but they have no proof of that whatsoever. They claim that allowing people to transition or to do gender-affirming care, it reduces suicide. It may have reduced suicide, but the suicidality of these people who transition are still high. And my argument has always been the cure cannot be worse than the symptoms, than the problem. The solution can't be worse than the problem. And I believe this is the case with the gender-affirming care, because I believe that instead there's a different approach to solving or helping with gender-affirming care. I believe that if you're facing gender dysphoria, you should be doing therapy to come to grips with the reality of your biological sex. I believe this is a more effective approach than merely going along with someone's self-perception of themselves and forcing the world to validate that. I think that's a harder thing to sell. And detransitioners like Chloe Cole, transgender Supreme Court case means everything to me. It is a law that if that were in place in my states while I was growing up, this would have never happened to me. Someone who regrets going through transgenderism, she talks about how she got conditioned to go along with this stuff online, people trying to reaffirm her. people taking advantage of her being vulnerable. This is some of the claims that she made as a detransitioner. And the fact that a lot of these people who push trans ideology do not want to admit that people like her exist, that people like her have substantive concerns about the transgender approach to solving gender dysphoria, it shows that there's a propaganda, there's a big push. And as you saw from the intro, and I know this is kind of a long-winded intro here, legal team for transgender surgery whistleblowers ripped Biden's DOJ for seeking gag order. Right? They believe they are entitled to prosecute Ethan Ham without public scrutiny of the immense power they wield. I don't know why they were sending all this stuff. Sorry about that. The legal team for Dr. Ethan Ham, the doctor who exposed Texas's Children's Hospital in May 2023, revealed that the facility had lied about ending its transgender medical program and was still performing attempted transition procedures on children as young as 11. Ripped the Biden DOJ for seeking a gag order targeting him in his legal case with the government. Like, imagine if you're so confident about your case, right? And if you're so confident about this position that gender affirming care is helpful, why are you trying to censor whistleblowers who are exposing, hey, this is against the law to be doing this, and y'all still doing this? This is a weird time to be alive today, right? Where you get people who claim that, oh, they trust the science, we trust the science, we trust science. But in this channel, how many videos I've done where I say, oh, there's a new study showing that there's a correlation between other mental disorders with gender dysphoria. No one wants to put out that evidence. How many times on this story I talk about how many people are showing the negative effects of puberty blockers in children? That is not healthy. It's not setting them up for a healthy life. Yet it's supposed to help with suicidality. And as you're going to see from these clips, I have a clip of how the Supreme Court reacted to some of this.
Being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, that there is absolutely a parallel between any law that says you can't act inconsistent with a protected characteristic and in all other contexts.
A question about the state of medical evidence at the present time. In your petition, you made a sweeping statement, which I will quote. Overwhelming evidence establishes that the appropriate gender-affirming treatment with puberty blockers and hormones directly and substantially improves the physical, psychological well-being of transgender adolescents with gender dysphoria. That was in November 2023. Now, even before then, the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare wrote the following. They currently assess, quote, that the risks of puberty blockers and gender-affirming treatment are likely to outweigh the expected benefits of these treatments, which is directly contrary to the sweeping statement in your petition. After the filing of your petition, of course, we saw the release of the Cass report in the United Kingdom, which found a complete lack of high-quality evidence showing that the benefits of the treatments in question here outweigh the risks. And so I wonder if you would like to stand by the statement that you made in your petition, or if you think it would now be appropriate to modify that and withdraw the statement that there is overwhelming evidence establishing that these treatments have benefits that greatly outweigh the risks and the dangers.
I, of course, acknowledge, Justice Alito, that there is a lot of debate happening here and abroad about the proper model of delivery of this care and exactly when adolescents should receive it and how to identify the adolescents for whom it would be helpful. But I stand by that there is...
I knew we were supposed to be a society that protects children, right? And I think one of the best things that ways you can protect children is that not allowing them to do procedures that are unproven, not to use our children as some type of experiment. And this is what it is. There's not a lot of data to back up a lot of these claims these people are making. All these claims are recent things. And we don't know the full ramifications of this stuff until what, 10, 20 more years down the road. And a part of me says we don't need 20 years to figure out that gender affirming care is bad for children. And this is Professor Richard Feynman. As you guys know, I like to quote him a lot because I believe the empirical method can be used to test and validate when you're trying to compare two policies. One policy, I believe, is that if I have a kid that's going through gender dysphoria, I'd rather he goes through therapy with someone who's an expert in gender dysphoria and help him come to terms with the reality of his biology. While the other case, the other method, the other approach is to do cosmetic surgery effectively. That's what gender affirming care is. Cosmetic surgery, so his physical body is more in line with what he thinks he is. And I think that's wrong. I think that's the wrong approach. And the fact that we're letting children do this, it shows me that, this is just nothing more than a status symbol. Many studies talk about social contagion, how making the trans stuff popular to do is also incentivizing more young people to do this stuff. Question authority. No idea is true just because someone says so. Test ideas by evidence gained from observation and experiment. I agree with the statement. I believe too long in politics, we've been doing this rationalization stuff. It's time for some evidence. It is if a favorite idea fails a well-designed test, it is wrong. AKA, if you test your theory in reality and reality shows you your theory is wrong, you must accept your theory is wrong. But you got in the same court hearing, right? I'm about to share right now. In the same court hearing, you have liberal justices making arguments like, you can ban interracial marriage if you do this. I'm like, what? Where are you going with this? It's common practice in medicine to give different medicines based on your biology. Certain men get certain dosage differently from women. So you're gonna say, we have to give you the same dosage of a certain medicine. Men can tolerate higher dosages of certain medicine. Women can't. So you want to give them the same dosage of medicine just because, we don't want to discriminate based on gender. The reality is gender and sex. Gender is an expression of sex. Gender is a language, right? It's word. We're playing word games here. This is the reality. This trans issue is nothing more than word games. But in the world of reality, gender is an extension of sex. What is the definition of woman? Adult, human, female. All these are biological terms. Adult, the life stage of a human being. Female, your biological sex. Right? Human, the species. This word encapsulates three different things. It's a function. It's supposed to help you express what you observe in reality. That's the test. That's the well-designed test. Hey, if you say you're a trans-identifying man, why don't you have to check your prostate at 40 years old? If you're a trans-identifying woman, why do you have to get your prostate checked when that's usually associated with men? No, you can't keep changing stuff. You know how they say you have to keep lying to hold up a lie? This is how I see the transgender issue.
Eliminate the risk of detransitioners. So it becomes a pure exercise of weighing benefits versus risk. And the question of how many minors have to have their bodies irreparably harmed for unproven benefits is one that is best left.
I'm sorry, counselor. Every medical treatment has a risk. Even taking aspirin. There is always going to be a percentage of the population under any medical treatment that's going to suffer a harm. So the question in my mind is not, do policymakers decide whether one person's life is more valuable than the millions of others who get relief from this treatment? The question.
They're trying to make an opportunity argument here, but I don't think that's a very good argument to make in this case, because I think what people are arguing is, should we allow people to do a procedure that is detrimental. There's studies suggesting that it is detrimental to the health of the people that are doing it. Should we allow these people to do that? Justice Thomas sprung a killer question for the ACLU lawyer, which is the trans-identifying man or woman that you saw. See, I'm getting confused with all these terms. Serge Strangio, right? Flux bisection and simple question and said an interjection. What remedy are you seeking? This is the question. This is the goal, right? Because end of the day, that's the point of medicine. If you're saying that this is care, this is health care, then it has to remedy something. What are you trying to remedy? Right? And this is why I said that gender affirming care is nothing more than cosmetic surgery, where there is no health benefits to it. It's just meant for appearances. That's it. That's the reality of gender affirming care. And I want to read something that I saw on the Daily Wire, right? Recent data comes from the Center of the Disease and Control and Prevention Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, as well as the agency's Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Many medical professionals have in recent years lent their full-throated support to minors receiving puberty blockers. Now, many conservatives believe that this is due to the fact that it's very expensive to do a lot of these procedures, and every person that does gender affirming care, that's like that's $75,000 that you have to spend with healthcare costs, and that people see there's a moral hazard with medical professionals having an incentive to go along with this stuff because it benefits them financially. So essentially, the conservatives are putting out there's a conflict of interest for these medical professionals to do a full-throated support for minors receiving puberty blockers because they see that as a constant money mill. Oh, there's always going to be problems because your body rejects the puberty blockers. You get negative side effects like, I forget, your bones don't properly develop if you go to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and in some cases, surgical transition, which can mean double mastectomies and bottom surgery. Now, some professionals are speaking out and warning about the dangers of rushing in medically transitioning a teen or young person who says that the identity of their gender is opposite from their biological one. It is notable that the risk is predominantly evident among teenagers and young adults. If it was spread amongst all age groups, then it would merely witness a correction taking place where people who previously felt unable to live as the trans now felt free to do so. But this isn't happening. Instead, something else is going on amongst teenagers and young people, and it's imperative that clinicians, educators, and policymakers carry out an in-depth analysis of this population, says Stella O'Malley. I'm pretty sure, a psychotherapist who works with young people. O'Malley added that there are many untrue statistics related to the transgender people, especially when it comes to suicide. Right now, the data suggests that the risk of suicide remains both post-affirmative and post-transition. Sadly, there's no magic solution to life, and suggesting that affirmation or medical transition will fix a person's suicidality is a dangerous promise to make, she told the Daily Wire. Another physician blamed the rise in gender incongruence in the population on a social contagion. This is something I have said too, that are fueled by social media and full support by woke medical institutions. We know that there's a high percentage of 60 to 98% of kids who are given support with no longer identify as being the wrong sex as adults. Sex cannot be changed. It begins at a conception and is solidified during embryonic development in the womb, says Dr. Michael K. Laidlaw, MD, a board-certified physician and these specialists in California. There's no scientific way to turn a female body into that of a fertile adult male, nor is there any way to turn a male body into a fertile adult female. Lawler noted that as well as that cross-sex hormones come with significant risks, including infertility, deadly blood clots, heart attacks, increased cancer risk of the breast and ovaries, liver dysfunction, worsening psychological illness, and other serious conditions. Does that sound like side effects equivalent to aspirin? Maybe. But the argument here is that they are not able to prove that the benefits outweigh the cost of the side effects. And I think this is what's messing up their whole statement here. This person telling the Supreme Court children can be sterilized and mutilated as minors and states have no ability to stop it. Look at her. She poses as a man unconvincingly and clearly wants to feel validated by your kids doing it too. You know what the old saying used to be? Misery loves company, right? Misery loves company. And I don't want to condemn my children to this because at the end of the day, this is permanent. They can't take this back. You know what causes suicidality? I'm going to make this claim here. is the reality that you do all this work. You make yourself look like a man as close as possible, and people could still know that you were a woman. You can't trick it like these trans dudes that be coming up, like the one that went in Ben Shapiro's face and acted like a woman, which a woman thinks a man is. The same way that when men identify as women, women get assaulted and say, "Oh, this is what men think women act like, dainty." Just look at Dylan Mulvaney. Many women are offended by that, by how he acts. Oh, you think this is how women act? We're just oblivious to sports and all this stuff. Oh, living up to stereotypes, right? Because and the reality is that they know what they're doing. It's not helping them. Like, you doing a short-term fix and you setting them up for long-term pain, because when they got to go through different experience than an actual woman, then they start realizing, oh, I'm different. And that's even more highlighted because from that point, they did everything they can to affirm themselves to be in their gender. And I think that's what causes suicidality even after post-transition, because they realize reality is, I can't be a man. Or men do certain things. Men act a certain particular way. And no matter how much I pretend to be a man, I'm not a man in reality. This is the case. You can't compete in our sports. Trans men are literally locked out of men's sports. They can't compete. They try, but it's obvious that you're not at our level physically. But I don't want to send up my kids for that hell. I'd rather do the hard thing. The hard thing is getting them to realize, hey, this is the reality of your situation. In the short term, it may not feel good to hear this, son, if my kids experience gender dysphoria, but in the long term, you'll thank me for it. Because at the end of the day, the detransitioners, that's a considerable problem. And the fact that these people will try to, there's side effects. Some people will regret this. Okay, but why do they regret it though? What are the reasonings? These people can't prove that there is benefits to this. When asked a simple question, what remedy are you seeking? And then getting owned by the fact, and this is the same argument that I made, that Clarence Thomas made, is that, you can sue for medical administrations of certain drugs, because certain drugs, they need a higher dosage to be effective on men, and then it needs a lesser dosage to be effective on women. So if you give them the same dosage, when you put the women at risk, because you can claim that sex is discrimination too. It's like all they see is right here. They don't see 20 years, 30 years down the line. And I think the position here is, we shouldn't be experimenting on our children. And many people, such as myself, I see this as you experimenting on children. And I'll be damned if you do that to my kid. You can do it to your kid, liberal, but I'm not doing it to my kid. But stop trying to push the idea, this concept, because conservatives believe that it's a social contagion of these teachers and these liberal teachers. This is why a lot of people like me, we want to homeschool our kid, because we don't want you to be putting ideas in our impressionable kid's mind. Under the age of 7, kids operate at a subconscious level. Kids are not conscious of their surroundings fully until after the age of 7. So if you're putting these ideas in their head, in their unconscious mind, when they're still they're like tape recorders. They record everything that is said to them, that is done to them, and they internalize that stuff. You introducing these concepts at such a vulnerable age, I believe, is what's causing trans kids. And I wish we just did an experiment. Okay, don't introduce transgender ideology to these kids. Introduce it to these kids and see how the rates of people who identify as transgender goes up. They don't want to do that because it would validate the social contagion part, especially when you see where a majority of the population of these trans children reside in. It's in states like California. Large amount of them is in California, New York. They're like, yo, why is it so regional? They don't want to answer these questions because they know the reality is it's something that they're pushing. It's an idea that they're pushing in the minds of their children. And when red states say we don't want none of this BS, they're trying to force their beliefs on us. We ban it in Tennessee, they want to unban it. Make it make sense. Worry about it in your state. Don't try to be pushing that on us. And this is a big problem that these advocates for gender affirming care have to respond to. They have to respond to these concerns, or else they'll continue getting pushback. And everyone knows, like, yo, this stuff happened 5 years. Like, y'all just started doing this, like, what, 10 years ago? Look at all the precedent we had for the realities of biology. And now you're going to pretend that that doesn't matter anymore. That's going to be a very hard argument to make, but they're trying to make it. Let me know your thoughts about this whole case with the Supreme Court. Do you agree with the liberal justices, the conservative justices? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section about this whole concept of gender affirming care. And do you agree with me that this is not the best approach to doing it? I believe the best approach to doing resolving gender dysphoria is to get them to come to terms with a psychiatric therapist to help them come to the reality of their gender and not do cosmetic surgery to essentially fit their body into their delusion. Just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.